Part 1. Expansion of Consciousness to All Humans.
In the following sections, we will explore how to expand our consciousness to encapsulate all of humanity.
The expansion of consciousness.
To understand humanity is to comprehend human nature and consciousness. The CONAF applies universally to all people across cultures and helps explain the psychology of an individual, as elaborated in my first book. How do we transition from understanding the psychology of an individual to that of the collective?
Figure 2. Expansion of consciousness.
First, imagine a person surrounded by a CONAF. Then expand the circle larger and larger. As the circle grows, it begins to encapsulate other people. What does this mean? As we include others within our circle, we incorporate them into our consciousness, awareness, intentionality, care, and concern. We expand our awareness to encompass them. We become genuinely interested in their lives, experiences, and perspectives. We envision what life might be like for them within the context of their unique circumstances, attributes, and upbringing. Knowing the CONAF encapsulates everyone, we contemplate the fulfillment or deprivation of their needs. In a sense, we try to walk in their shoes. Expanding consciousness is an expansion of awareness, mindfulness, understanding, empathy, and compassion for others. An individual with expanded consciousness, deep awareness, and empathy will naturally take on the care and concern for the CONAF of others. Like a droplet of water falling into a still pond, the ripple expands outward, growing in size. How far and how wide can a person expand their consciousness? How many different people of various identities can they include in their circle of care and concern? How genuine are they about fulfilling the CONAF of other people within their consciousness?
The inverted cone of consciousness, ICCON.
While this model of an expanding ripple of consciousness plays out on the flat plane of a widening circle, it's more accurate to think of the expansion of consciousness not just in width, but also in elevation. As consciousness expands outward, it also rises upward to trace the outline of an inverted cone.
Figure 3. Inverted cone of consciousness, ICCON.
At the lowest level, represented by the bottom tip of the inverted cone, a person's consciousness is limited to only their own needs, focused solely on their experiences, feelings, pleasures, and pains. Their priority is to simply fulfill their individual CONAF, even at the expense of others. For instance, in the early stages of life, it's natural for babies to react solely to their own sensations, comfort and discomfort, especially when they lack awareness and understanding of people beyond themselves. A baby can cry at 3 a.m. to express their discomfort, with little awareness or regard for the well-being of others around them. However, when an adult still functions at this low level of consciousness, they will make decisions primarily for their own benefit, often without considering the impact on others, a state akin to absolute selfishness. In one of the worst scenarios, an extremely selfish person might fantasize about the thrilling stimulation of killing another person. They would have no qualms about planning and executing a murder just for the experience. Typically, as people mature, their consciousness naturally expands to include their immediate family, such as their mother, father, or caregivers. Consciousness and concern now extend to people who directly affect their survival and comfort. They slowly learn to develop sympathy and consider the needs of the people closest to them. Any harm to their inner circle would mean consequential detriment to them in some way. Over time, people develop friendships that help fulfill their need for affirmation, competence, and stimulation beyond family. A hangout buddy might enjoy shared interests, but a good friend is usually considered someone who is kind, caring, supportive, and loyal, someone who values the significance, existence, and uniqueness of another. The quality of this affirmation is conditional upon reciprocity and mutual interest. Naturally, a genuinely caring person's consciousness would expand to include their friends. The well-being of their friends can affect their own sense of well-being. The most evident expansion of consciousness is the full responsibility of parenthood. The weight of being someone's mother or father is heavy. The expectation of that role is to provide and fulfill the CONAF of the child, since the child did not ask to be born but came into existence as a result of the adult's actions. A loving parent naturally expands their consciousness to include their children, incorporating the child's konaf into their own. Even when a parent is safe in their home with their own konaf fairly complete, they cannot truly be at peace if their child is in danger, whether struggling with drug misuse or fighting a war far from home.
Group Affiliation. As individuals develop their personal identities, they often align themselves with various groups defined by characteristics such as race, gender, nationality, political affiliation, religion, beliefs, hobbies, interests, or even physical attributes. This natural alignment leads individuals to incorporate the status and well-being of these groups into their personal sphere of concern. The group's status deeply influences their ego and sense of identity. Belonging to a group satisfies their need for affirmation, and competition between groups can strengthen unity, challenge their abilities, and enhance their sense of superiority, especially if they prevail. On a more benign level, intense identification with a sports team can lead individuals to experience profound joy or despair based on the team's performance. Victories and defeats can significantly impact their self-esteem. This deep emotional investment in a team's fortunes can lead to extreme reactions, ranging from jubilation to anger and even destructive behavior, driven by underlying emotional pain and grievances. In more extreme cases, this dynamic plays out in situations involving conflicts over scarce resources like land or water. Individuals who strongly identify with their tribal, national, ethnic, or racial groups may feel compelled to defend their group's rights or territory. This can lead to justification for conflicts where each side staunchly supports what they perceive as the righteousness of their cause. Such conflicts not only satisfy a primal urge for resource security, but also fulfill a deep-seated need for superiority, as one group seeks to dominate another. Transcendence of Consciousness.
Humans at the lowest level of consciousness focus solely on their needs. For their own benefit, they have no qualms about murdering another person. They might plan and torture another if it stimulates them or suits their needs. They may commit rape when overwhelmed by sexual rage. As people elevate their consciousness to include their family, friends, nationalities, races, religions, or any broader group affiliations, they can be loving and kind toward their in-group while still committing atrocities against out-groups for the sake of their circumscribed identification. When one's consciousness encapsulates others, compassion expands to include the well-being of others. It is a progression from utter selfishness to divine selflessness. This spectrum from lower to higher consciousness underpins the concepts of good and evil, the source of darkness and light we observe within human nature and reflected in the world we create. The expansion of consciousness is an expansion of awareness about the experiences, both joyous and suffering, of others. It also broadens our intentionality to care for the konaf of others. The highest level of consciousness is one of concern and love that encompasses all humans from all backgrounds and identities, transcending narrower identifications such as nationality, gender, or race. The entire ocean of humanity is cradled and nurtured within our consciousness. We awaken to the simple truth that the divisions separating people are arbitrary. We are made of the same flesh and blood, with the same physical bodies that demand the same requirements, all trapped and pulled by the same konaf. Life is an unfortunate game of competition for limited resources. Since matter cannot overlap, physical bodies must fight for their own space to exist. To sustain the body, we need to absorb matter and energy. To live in comfort and luxury, we must outcompete others. Despite language and cultural differences, looking deeply into another person's eyes reveals the same yearning for life, the same needs. When our minds elevate to a higher level, expanding our consciousness to include all people and encapsulating their well-being into our concern, the divisions between people fade away. The droplet of water has joined the sea. An individual realizes their unity with the vast ocean of humanity. This highest level of consciousness is demonstrated by the most highly respected religious figures. The ideal of compassion is exemplified by the sacrifices made at their own expense for the benefit of others. The story of Jesus conveys that he willingly endured humiliation and suffering on the cross to take on the sins of all people. There are stories about bodhisattvas who delay their own enlightenment to remain in the cycle of samsara, to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings. These spiritual ideals represent the pinnacle of human consciousness in the inverted cone model. This is what it means to transcend our own natural selfishness. Expansion of consciousness is the transcendence of earthly identity and selfishness. For this section, I'm only exploring the expansion of consciousness on an intellectual level. Later in our journey, we will delve into this concept from an emotional level and finally complete it on a spiritual level.
Gauging an individual's level of consciousness. By discerning a person's position on the inverted cone of consciousness, ICCON, we can better understand their degree of selfishness versus selflessness, which in turn contributes to the development of virtues and vices. To belabor the point, individuals functioning at the lowest level of the ICCON can only think of themselves, while those at the highest level manifest concern for all of humanity. This stratification of consciousness into lower or higher levels on an inverted cone may be discomforting for many people. Modern culture, especially with the mentality of toxic positivity, tends to promote blind, feel-good ideologies by emphasizing the uniqueness and inherent goodness of each person, fearfully avoiding uncomfortable truths. While this thinking stems from good intentions and kindness, it lacks the wisdom and strength needed to honestly examine reality and confront the truth. Natural disasters, while tragic and beyond human control, contribute to suffering, but the greatest source of suffering on this planet comes from human choices and actions. Humanity as an ocean.
Humanity is a vast ocean composed of countless droplets of individuality. We exist as separate entities, but beneath the surface, we are deeply interconnected. This interdependence is evident from the earliest stages of life. A newborn relies entirely on caregivers for survival. As we grow, the actions of those around us, whether in our immediate vicinity or across the globe, profoundly influence the conditions of our lives. Similarly, our actions significantly affect the lives of others. At its core, human existence is built upon a foundation of interdependence. With few exceptions, most individuals rely on one another to meet their basic needs, whether it's the construction of shelter, the provision of food, or the creation of material comforts. Our daily lives are sustained by the collective efforts of society. We also turn to one another for emotional and psychological well-being, seeking safety, affirmation, and stimulation from our relationships and interactions. A single death can send shockwaves through a community, demonstrating how the loss of one life ripples through the surface of humanity. The actions of one person, such as a mass murderer, can disrupt the delicate web of interdependence that underpins our society, causing widespread harm and leaving scars that reverberate far beyond the immediate victims. Conversely, the impact of influential political or spiritual leaders can transform human society for the better or worse, with their legacy lasting for generations. In essence, humanity's existence is a constant dance of give and take, a symphony of interconnected lives that collectively shape the course of our world. Recognizing the depth of our interdependence highlights the importance of fostering compassion, empathy, and cooperation. By expanding our consciousness to include all of humanity, elevating beyond our ego, and transcending our individual identities, we can embrace the well-being of all people.
Examining human-human relationships. Using the inverted cone of consciousness, ICCON, as a model to understand the spectrum of selfishness and selflessness, let's examine human interactions that impact one another. The beauty of connections.
Within the vast ocean of humanity, countless acts of kindness, love, generosity, and compassion course through the currents of our lives. These stories are tributes to the remarkable capacity of individuals to embrace goodness toward one another and the beauty of expanded consciousness. Consider the profound love that flows from parents to their children, an unending, unconditional, selfless devotion. Loving parents naturally expand their consciousness to encapsulate the well-being of their children. The sacrifices made, the unwavering support offered, and the beautiful affection shared between parent and child create a bond that defines the very essence of human connection. Expanding outward, The care within immediate families serves as a testament to the enduring power of human relationships founded on empathy, understanding, and love. Pushing the boundary further, genuine friendships offer a radiant beacon of goodness. In the camaraderie among friends, one finds the warmth of companionship, the solace of shared laughter, and the backing of loyal support. Yet, humanity's goodness shines not only within these intimate circles. Strangers, too, have the remarkable capacity to extend a helping hand in times of need. Whether it's a passerby offering assistance during a roadside emergency, a neighbor lending a hand with groceries, or communities uniting to provide aid in times of disaster, these acts of compassion reveal the innate willingness of individuals to support others, often with no expectation of reciprocation. Acts of charity, benevolence, and philanthropy stand as towering pillars of goodness in the human story. Individuals and organizations alike channel their resources and energies toward making a positive impact on the lives of those less fortunate, whether through the provision of food and shelter to the homeless, the funding of critical medical research, or support for educational initiatives. These selfless acts offer not just relief, but the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Volunteers, driven by their passion for making a difference, dedicate their time and skills to various causes, embodying the altruistic spirit that resides within us all. By mentoring disadvantaged youth, providing companionship to the elderly, participating in vital environmental conservation efforts, or lending support to helpless animals, volunteers contribute to the betterment of society, showcasing the profound impact individuals can have on their communities.
The concept of suffering.
The goodness of humanity is beautiful, but there is also darkness. Before we explore the negative impacts of human interaction, let's examine the concept of suffering. What is suffering? As physical and emotional beings, we suffer when we experience physical injury or negative emotions. More broadly, we suffer when our conaf is damaged or at risk of fracturing. Our attitude toward the injury can either soften or worsen the suffering, as discussed in the first book. In the next sections, we will explore different scenarios where our conaf is in danger.
Conflict.
While death, sickness, and natural disasters can cause immense suffering, I'm more interested in examining the suffering caused by human interaction. Why is this important? Humanity is the most potent force in the known physical existence here on Earth. Our population has exploded and now dominates every continent. Our control and power over physical reality are immense, shaping the sea, land, and air, transforming matter and energy, lording over other species, and impacting one another. Humans can lift each other up, as described in the previous section on connections, but we can also cause untold suffering. The source of this suffering is the inherent conflict of interest as different people compete to fulfill their own conaf, possibly at the expense of others. In a physical reality with finite resources, when two people compete for the same thing, conflict is inevitable. Not only must individuals overcome the harsh environment and dangerous animals to survive, they also have to watch out for other people. Since two atoms cannot occupy the same space, two people cannot occupy the same area. Physical existence requires the possession of a body that requires the consumption of finite matter and energy. People naturally want to claim resources for shelter, protection, nutrition, and control. Psychologically, when two people compete to assert their superiority, not just for resources or mating rights, but also for status and prestige, conflict inevitably arises. Everyone has their own conaf, and multiple circles can grind against one another like circular blades. For one person to fulfill their need for safety and security, another might have it taken away. For one person to feel superior, another might end up feeling inferior. The stimulation of one person might demand the suffering of another. This inherent competition for survival, resources, and status is at the root of much of the suffering caused by human interaction. As long as people prioritize their individual needs without regard for the interconnectedness of all beings, conflict will persist.
Inconsideration.
The most common sign of lower consciousness is inconsiderate acts. Consideration means being aware and mindful of the people around us. A considerate person recognizes the existence and needs of others, thereby behaving in ways that balance their own desires with respect for those around them. They fulfill their own needs while minimizing the negative impact on others. In contrast, an inconsiderate person is unaware or simply doesn't care about other people. Their behavior is self-centered, aimed at maximizing their own desires and pleasures, often at the expense of others. For instance, since we all share physical space, a considerate person would be mindful of how much space they take up, whether in public places, on transportation, or in communal areas. They would ensure they don't obstruct walkways or invade others' personal space. An inconsiderate person, on the other hand, might block an entire aisle with their shopping cart, sprawl across a shared seat, or act as though they are the only person around. Similarly, when it comes to noise, a considerate person would keep their voice or music at a reasonable volume, aware that others may prefer quiet or have different needs. In contrast, an inconsiderate person will blast music or speak loudly, disregarding the comfort of those nearby, as if other people either don't exist or simply don't matter. This lack of awareness or care becomes particularly harmful in shared living spaces. Roommates, neighbors, or even tourists sharing the same environment can experience tension when inconsiderate behaviors arise. When people fail to recognize the needs of those around them, the atmosphere can shift from one of cooperation to competition. The result? A race to prioritize individual comfort over collective harmony, which risks shrinking the consciousness of everyone involved. Rather than fostering compassion and mutual respect, interactions with inconsiderate people can devolve into a battle of egos, where everyone justifies the importance of their own needs above all else. This is how consciousness becomes constrained, limiting growth and connection.
Tribalism.
At a primordial level, people needed to band together for mutual survival and comfort. By cooperating as a group, individuals could better fulfill their needs for shelter, safety, and resources. This natural inclination to form groups led to the growth of human settlements, evolving from small gatherings to tribes, hamlets, villages, towns, cities, and eventually nations. The konafs of individuals strategically aggregate into the collective konaf of a group or organization. Whether it's securing water, hunting grounds, or agricultural land, people naturally stake their claims for survival. Historically, tribalism has been a means of survival, one tribe against another. Specific components of the konaf apply to groups as well. Just as an individual needs affirmation that they exist and matter, which forms the foundation for connection and belonging, so too does a group. A group identity also requires affirmation, an acknowledgement that it exists and matters. Members within a group can affirm one another, but they also need validation from other groups. At the most basic level, this affirmation might be as simple as, "Hey, we exist. Don't just waltz into our land or stadium." On a more interactive level, a newly developed company needs acknowledgement from other companies to trade, or one sports team needs acknowledgement from other teams to compete. A lack of affirmation can occur when a poorly performing sports team is disregarded or relegated to invisible status by others, refusing to engage with it. A group must also develop and prove its competence to survive. The group with higher competence has a better chance of survival. If the environment is based on hunting wild animals, the group that can trap and hunt better will have more to eat. If it's agriculture, the group more skilled in growing crops and navigating unpredictable weather or pests will reduce the risk of famine. The development of knowledge, skills, and technology enhances exploration and survival. Groups, like individuals, also need stimulation. The pursuit of stimulation by individuals can aggregate into the stimulation of the wider group, giving rise to cultural entertainment, which becomes part of cultural customs. An individual interest can grow into a group interest. Athletic competitions, for example, can incorporate multiple needs at once. The affirmation of the in-group, the demonstration of competence by the chosen team, stimulation through excitement, and the establishment of superiority over others. At its core, a group's most fundamental interest is to look out for its own konaf.
Superiority.
The need for superiority drives comparison and competition among groups. This need gives rise to the many isms that pervade the world. A common manifestation of group superiority is racism, where one group believes their race is superior to another. History is filled with examples of this, with some of the most well-known being the Aryan racism during World War II, leading to the Holocaust, or the racial justification for the enslavement of Africans in Europe and the United States. While racism is universally condemned in modern times, it persists in many places, especially in the hidden recesses of the human heart. When people with lower levels of consciousness need to feel special, they cling to a superficial construct to feel superior to someone else. Often, individuals who engage in racism have little else in their lives to feel competitive about, so they rely on an arbitrary trait they happen to inherit. Anyone from any race can fall into this mindset, as lower consciousness exists across all groups. Nationalism, in its toxic form, is another example of superiority, a nation believing itself to be above others. The milder form may involve derision or mockery, but in its malignant form, it justifies the domination of one nation over another. A nation that is stronger or more technologically advanced might believe it has the right to conquer another, seizing and exploiting both human and natural resources to satisfy its conaf. This need for superiority can also stem from a deeper, more primal insecurity. A sense of fear, whether of losing one's status, identity, or control, drives individuals and groups to assert their dominance over others. Racism and nationalism, while seeming like assertions of strength, are often masks for this underlying fear. At their core, they reflect a collective vulnerability, where instead of seeking connection, individuals cling to separation, creating hierarchies to defend their fragile sense of self. The tragedy of this mindset is that it perpetuates division, necessitates competition, and stokes conflicts. Beyond fear, the desire for domination and superiority is often driven by other primal impulse, the urge to conquer and control. For some, it is not the fear of losing status, but the satisfaction of asserting power over others that drives these actions. Superiority, in this context, becomes its own reward, as the pleasure of domination feeds the ego. This motivation enters the realm of unchecked ambition, where the pursuit of control for its own sake becomes a central objective. Here, the desire to stand above others is not a defense mechanism, but a deliberate assertion of one's perceived right to rule.
War.
In the grand narrative of humanity, the competition for finite resources has been a pivotal force, shaping the course of our history and evolution. This competition often manifested as aggression, and it's fascinating to trace its own evolution, from a basic act of self-defense in the struggle for survival to more complex, expansive forms of conflict driven by ambition. Consider the earliest days of human existence when small groups fought off predators and rival clans, carving out their place in a harsh and unforgiving world. These skirmishes were fueled by a fundamental instinct: self-preservation. Survival required staking a claim to scarce resources, forcing groups to defend their territory to ensure access to essentials like food, water, and shelter. In these ancient times, aggression was not a matter of choice but of necessity, a tool wielded in the name of survival. As social structures evolved, so too did the nature of aggression. Tribes became more organized, honing their skills in warfare and defense. But with this newfound confidence came a shift. What began as self-defense morphed into what we might call righteous offense. No longer content to merely protect their own, groups began to view conquest as a legitimate means of securing additional resources and asserting their dominance over others. This marked a turning point, where the primal instinct to survive evolved into the pursuit of power, territory, and superiority. In some cases, this drive for expansion took on a divine or ideological flavor. Leaders and conquerors, emboldened by their victories, often proclaimed a divine mandate to unite lands under their rule. Religion and ideology became potent justifications for aggression, sanctifying conquest and the subjugation of others. The victors, armed with a sense of divine superiority, often portrayed their victims as inferior savages, in need of liberation or conversion, a justification for dominance that blurred the line between aggression and righteousness. Thus, The story of humanity is not just one of triumph over environmental challenges, but also one of shadow, marked by competition, warfare, and the relentless pursuit of power. Throughout the ages, conflicts over land, borders, and resources, driven by the same fundamental need to secure life's necessities, have shaped the geopolitical landscape. From the dawn of time, humanity's need to survive has always been intertwined with its desire to dominate, a force that continues to steer our collective path.
Genocide.
Death and murder are inevitable parts of war. Yet when one group holds a clear advantage over another, the drive to claim resources or to assert absolute superiority can lead to the annihilation of an entire people. This is the dark side of power, the complete disregard for life when domination becomes the ultimate goal. When people are consumed by their conaf at the level of group identity, whether that identity stems from tribal affiliation, nationality, race, religion, politics, or ideology, they succumb to the temptation to harm others. Their consciousness becomes limited, reduced to the narrow boundaries of their group, and thus, they naturally rank lower on the ICCON system. This makes them beings of lower consciousness. From this diminished state, despite possessing superior technological power or influence, they feel no moral conflict in treating others outside their circle as inferior animals, pests, or mere tools to be exploited and discarded. Life, in its design, is fiercely dedicated to survival. For all living beings, the struggle to continue living is fundamental, and death, in its rawest form, is painful and deeply aversive. Even when a person yearns for death, the body itself is programmed for survival. It reacts instinctively to injury and pain, reflexively pulling away from harm through neural loops that bypass the brain, prioritizing immediate action over thoughtful decision-making. Pain serves as a physical deterrent, and alongside it, emotions like fear and panic rise in response to danger, fueling the body's desperate fight to survive. To take a single life, then, is to overpower all these intricate mechanisms, all these reflexive behaviors designed to cling to life. The extinguishing of one life is a profound act, nearly unimaginable in its gravity. But to annihilate an entire group of people through a planned, coordinated effort, that is an act beyond comprehension, a breach of all that is sacred in life. And yet, beings of lower consciousness will find ways to rationalize and justify such acts. They disguise their actions in the cloak of self-righteous defense of their conaf, claiming it is for the survival or supremacy of their group.
A visit to the killing field in Cambodia.
During my medical school training, I was fortunate enough to participate in Mercer on Mission, a humanitarian program organized by Mercer University School of Medicine that travels to rural parts of Cambodia to provide free medical services to underserved populations. The mission was a collaboration across multiple disciplines, including medicine, nursing, pharmacy, and select college students. In addition to our clinical services, we had excursions to different places to learn more about Cambodia. One searing scar on the people of Cambodia is the impact of the Khmer Rouge, a communist regime that tortured and killed millions under the paranoid political ideology of Pol Pot from 1975 to 1979. On the surface, the Khmer Rouge's circle of identity easily excluded people of other nationalities, such as Vietnamese, Chinese, Cham, Thai, or Western foreigners. However, due to their paranoia about betrayal, the Khmer Rouge's political circle of identity and allegiance shifted unpredictably, pushing even former comrades outside the circle. The insider became the outsider. As with all outsiders, they were targeted to be systematically tortured and killed. Prior to the trip, we were required to read In the Shadow of the Banyan by Vadi Ratner, an amazing book that tells a survival story amid the horrors of the regime. One of the excursions took us to Tuol Sleng, once a high school that was converted into a detention and interrogation center, where political prisoners were tortured and killed. The courtyard outside the building looked, for the most part, like a typical schoolyard. However, walking through the building felt like a teleportation to another realm. The tiny makeshift brick cells inside the classrooms used to house inmates, and the metallic shackles on the ground laid bare the stark reality of imprisonment. I could imagine and feel the quiet heaviness of the residual misery. In a few classrooms, photographs of captives from the moment they first arrived at the center were on display, their faces and eyes staring directly at the camera. Now, those soulless stares gaze at visitors from a different era. If the camera lens is a portal through time, how many victims silently beg for help and salvation? Some gruesome photographs show the bodies after they were tortured and murdered, eyes closed, as if sleeping, except for the splatter of blood on their clothes or revealed by their starved skeletal nudity in others. All this horror manifests tortuously on their faces and bodies. There were a few empty rooms with only a metallic bed frame in the center, an odd arrangement for a room. One could still see the bloodstains on the white and orange tile floor, and a photo of the victim on the wall above the bed. These rooms were used for horrifying tortures and executions. Victims were helplessly strapped onto the metallic bed frame to endure the gruesome creativity of their torturers. Humanity, at one of its worst. When the detention center ran out of space to bury the bodies, prisoners were transported to nearby killing fields for execution and burial. The killing field we visited was Choeung Ek, about 15 kilometers from Phnom Penh, the capital of Cambodia and the location of Tuol Sleng. Prisoners were executed here with everyday objects, axes, shovels, wooden clubs, metal pipes, or plastic bags to save bullets. One way to execute babies or small children was to swing them against a tree trunk. A loudspeaker was attached to this tree to drown out the sounds of murder so the awaiting prisoners would not panic and remain manageable. In modern times, a Buddhist stupa was constructed nearby, housing thousands of human skulls found in the burial pits. Despite the obvious horror of the killing field and the scar it left on me, what struck me most was the beauty of nature during my visit. The temperature that day was a bit hot but tolerable for Cambodia, while a gentle breeze refreshingly brushed by. The birds chirped away, breaking the solemn silence, and the blue sky was beautiful, with white clouds hanging peacefully above. Such a contrast between the past horror and the present beauty. However, I wondered, was a similar beautiful weather, blue skies, white clouds, gentle breezes, and chirping birds, also present during the killing days? As prisoners were shackled and blindfolded, waiting for their fate, did they also feel the breeze brush by them, or hear the chirping of birds competing with the loudspeaker? This experience emphasized a point that, while obvious, struck me deeply. Nature is impartial to suffering, and the world spins on. It is a neutral truth, but a deeply emotional one for me.
Expanding my consciousness.
My consciousness in that moment was grounded in the present reality of natural beauty and solemn remembrances. As long as I stay tethered to that present moment, the horrors of the past seem distant, almost unreachable. But consciousness is not bound by space alone. It can stretch beyond time and reach into the shadows of history. My mind, with a quiet curiosity, tries to touch the sensations and emotions of the victims from so long ago. I wonder what it would be like to drop my consciousness into their experiences, and I shudder at the imagined horror. Fear freezes me before I can probe too far or too deep. And then I wonder, could my consciousness reach into the minds of the executioners as well? Dare I try? Many of the victims of Tuol Sleng and the killing fields were once comrades of the Khmer Rouge, swept away by the tide of paranoia that consumed the party. The narrative we often hear is that of soldiers following orders, driven by fear for their own lives and survival. For them, fulfilling their need for safety and security meant taking the lives of others. But what about those who may have enjoyed the act of murder? Could there have been executioners who felt a twisted sense of superiority over their victims, deriving some perverse stimulation from the act of taking a life? How does one take a life and still call themselves human? Humanity is an ocean, and my drop of consciousness trembles at the thought of experiencing both the victim and the murderer. The weight of that duality shakes me to my core, Beyond Tuol Sleng and the killing fields, I also visited the Holocaust concentration camp in Dachau, Germany, a place marked by other horrors. The experience there was surreal, horrifying in its own right. But I will defer sharing those emotions, as this book is already burdened with enough sorrow.
Oppression, exploitation, and abuse.
When one group asserts the power to dominate another, the way they exercise that power becomes a crucial reflection of their humanity, directly impacting the well-being of the weaker group. If the consciousness of the stronger group is low, focused solely on maximizing their own konaf without regard for others, they will treat the weaker group not as fellow humans, but as inferior beings, animals, meant only for exploitation and abuse. They strip away the konaf of others simply to fulfill their own. To maximize their comfort and pleasure, they will work their victims to the bone. To affirm their existence, prove their competence, and cement their superiority, they will strip their victims of dignity and humanity, emphasizing their inferiority. In their quest for stimulation, whether for entertainment, scientific, or medical pursuits, they will subject others to demented horrors. And to perpetuate this system of low consciousness, they make it their life's purpose to justify cruelty on intellectual, emotional, and even religious grounds. History is replete with examples of this tragic dynamic. Beings of lower consciousness, asserting superiority through technological advances or strategic deceit, exploit and abuse others with self-serving justifications. Some of the most well-known examples include the human experiments conducted by Nazi Germany during World War II, the brutal colonization by European nations, the horrors inflicted by the Japanese military during the war, the trail of tears and annihilation of Native Americans by American settlers, and the enslavement of African people by colonial powers. Lesser known but equally horrific is King Leopold's exploitation and cruelty toward the people of the Congo for wealth and resources. As I write this, I've typed out whole paragraphs detailing these atrocities, only to delete them afterward. The examples are easily researched, with abundant writings, photographs, and videos available online. There's a limit to how deeply I can delve into these horrors, and a limit to how much a reader can stomach.
Greed.
To ensure survival, we all require safety and security, which form a crucial foundation for the konaf. If we were lone survivors on a deserted island, we would need to expend great effort to secure shelter, protection, food, and water, all while defending against elemental threats and dangerous animals. The sheer amount of mental calculation, psychological stress, and physical labor required might still not guarantee success. In modern society, however, these needs are catered to through specialized products and services. Shelters range from the simple and functional to the extravagant, and food options span from the basic to the exquisite. Where once survival meant foraging and hunting, now it involves choosing between gourmet meals and prepackaged convenience. The ease of fulfilling our need for safety has transformed the landscape of human existence, yet the underlying drive remains the same. When it comes to stimulation, we can be creative, drawing from our own imaginations, or we can rely on the creative products of others. Countless options exist to satisfy this need, from free video clips and paid movies to immersive experiences like deep-sea exploration or, for the truly adventurous, outer space visits. The modern world offers no shortage of ways to stimulate the mind, from the familiar to the extraordinary.
The value of money.
What is the easiest way to obtain services and products to fulfill our needs? The answer is simple: money. With money, we hold the power to get almost anything our hearts desire, whether it's products available for sale or services from people willing to do almost anything for the right price. If a neighborhood is unsafe or a school is underperforming, having money allows a person to simply pack up and move to a better area. If life is about experiences, money provides access to an endless variety, from the most common of indulgences to luxurious meditation retreats. To affirm one's existence, people might dress themselves in extravagant garments or adorn themselves with flashy accessories. But the line between seeking affirmation and asserting superiority can be blurry. Where is the division between Hey, I exist, acknowledge me, and hey, I'm so much better than you. Worship me. In a world defined by competition, the ability to earn money often becomes a symbol of competence, or in some cases luck, like winning the lottery or inheriting wealth. Doing well in school, landing a high-paying job, succeeding as an entrepreneur, or mastering a craft becomes a badge of honor, an emblem of one's competence. Yet this competence can also morph into a source of pride, fueling the urge to assert superiority. The blending of affirmation and competence with superiority becomes the foundation for being liked, admired, and respected, the pathway from mere acknowledgement to popularity, fame, and glory. It's no wonder that because money buys safety, security, comfort, luxury, affirmation, competence, stimulation, and superiority, many people place the meaning and purpose of their lives on accumulating wealth. Some families, in their pursuit of this wealth, pressure their children to excel in school to secure well-paying jobs, often neglecting the deeper human needs for affirmation, connection, understanding, and support.
The development of greed.
People who chase after money, whether openly or subconsciously, often find themselves in a form of worship, not of a higher power, but of wealth itself. Those with this mentality proudly flaunt their wealth when they have it, and those who don't have it often look up to the ones who do, placing them on a pedestal. This dynamic explains society's obsession with wealth and status. But where does this mentality fall on the ICCON? It centers on one's own comfort, needs, and appearance. Some people, lacking money, will even go to great lengths to fake wealth, scraping together what little they have to buy expensive items or resorting to counterfeits, all for the sake of maintaining appearances. Within the family or friend circle, a greedy person of lower consciousness who cares only for themselves will hoard money, or worse, scam those closest to them. Expanding outward to the broader social realm, beings of lower consciousness will exploit others to gain money, regardless of the harm they cause. The most obvious examples are human traffickers, who exploit individuals for sex or labor, or drug dealers, who poison entire communities for profit. But some of the most heinous offenders are the politicians who vow to serve their people, pretending to be beings of higher consciousness. These individuals claim their circle of care includes their constituents, but they fall prey to corruption, siphoning resources for personal gain, or abusing their power to seize resources from helpless victims. On a larger scale, corporations driven by the singular pursuit of profit can commit crimes against humanity. For instance, the tobacco industry, despite knowing the risks of cancer and heart disease caused by their products, practiced denial and deception, muddying the truth to confuse the public. Similarly, opioid manufacturers knew about the addictive nature of their drugs, but aggressively marketed them as safe and effective. A highly memorable event was the global financial crisis, sparked by unchecked greed in the financial industry, which led to severe global recession and mass unemployment. Greed, when allowed to fester unchecked, has the power to topple economies and devastate lives.
Capitalism and socialism.
The means of producing goods and services to cater to human needs, and who owns them, therefore, who profits from their production, form the foundation of the conflict between the philosophical, economic, and political concepts of capitalism and socialism. Countless papers and discussions have been devoted to these topics, but to keep it simple, capitalism is the philosophy that supports individuals who can provide the best products and services, believing they deserve to win and own the capital. In contrast, socialism prioritizes society, asserting that people should collectively own the capital of production in an equal and classless society. To satisfy the CONAF, businesses compete with one another to offer the best products and services. The businesses that succeed in convincing consumers to invest their intentionality, whether through time or money, emerge triumphant. Quality, efficiency, customer service, and cost are all crucial factors in attracting customers. As with all competition, businesses that strive for and achieve superiority over their competitors reap the profits and thrive, while those that cannot compete struggle to survive and will eventually shut down. More complex products and services, at a minimum, require expertise to provide. This necessitates specialized education, training, and a refinement of one's craft. A random person cannot simply drift in and out of a specialized occupation and deliver at the same professional caliber. Without evidence-based knowledge and specialized skills aligned with reality, disasters can occur, such as the mass famines that killed millions during communist revolutions when poor planning led to catastrophic consequences. The essence of competition drives innovation. Entrepreneurs take great risks for the potential of great rewards. In the battlefield of business, many ventures fail along the way, but a few emerge victorious. In this competition, companies may also engage in sabotage to undermine their rivals. Once on top, the owners or shareholders of these businesses win big. However, the drive to maximize profit and minimize costs can lead to seeing employees and productivity as mathematical equations to optimize. If it reduces costs to move operations to a cheaper labor market with less self-advocating power, why not? If a region enforces strict environmental regulations, why not move the factory and its chemical waste to a poor village that can't fight for their rights? Human greed aligns most easily with capitalism, making it the dominant system in the current reality. However, a system based on greed and heartless calculations is bound to create disparities, the haves and the have-nots. The reaction against this wealth inequality is the basis of socialism, which argues that compassion and shared good should form the foundation of the economic system. Instead of the capitalist pigs owning the capital, the people should collectively control the means of production. The wealth of the elite class should be redistributed, ushering in a new utopia. Many revolutions throughout human history have been driven by this ideal. Oppressed workers and peasants have been galvanized to rise against the social hierarchy, to break the wheel of oppression that has crushed the poor. As with many revolutions, communist revolutions were bloody, deadly, and horrifying, all in pursuit of a greater ideal.
Turning the wheel.
However, how does the ideal stack up against reality? Are socialist or communist countries truly more compassionate and equal than capitalist ones? Is there really such a thing as a classless society? Do the leaders of socialist nations show more compassion and equality toward their citizens? Are the political elites any less corrupt or self-serving? The wheel of power turns, but it does not change. Understanding human nature and reality is crucial because people can have amazing ideas, fight for them with their lives, coerce others to follow, and even kill the opposition to advance their agenda, only to find that reality plays out quite differently from their ideals. The unfortunate truth is that the current state of humanity is one of collectively lower consciousness, where greed and pride reign supreme. After bloody revolutions that install socialist or communist regimes, the leaders and elites often succumb to the same base instincts that drive their capitalist counterparts. The exploitation of power structures to advance personal and familial interests is common. The significant wealth disparity between those in power, whether in corporations or politics, and the average citizen is typical and to be expected. In a communist power structure, the reflection of lower consciousness is especially apparent. While communist ideals promise equality and collective ownership, in practice, these systems often centralize power into the hands of a few elites. Those in charge, far from creating a classless society, build new hierarchies with themselves at the top. The promise of egalitarianism fades as the ruling class uses propaganda to control the masses and instills fear to suppress dissent. Leaders in these systems often seek to consolidate their power through authoritarian measures, all while justifying their actions as necessary for the greater good. This is not the manifestation of a higher consciousness, but the same ego-driven pursuit of domination that plagues all lower consciousness societies. The result is a hollow imitation of the ideals these systems claim to uphold. What was intended to bring liberation instead leads to oppression. The natural outcome. A political and financial system based on greed inevitably creates an environment where life becomes harder for most people, as the pursuit of wealth and power for a few comes at the expense of the many. Greed, in its essence, distorts priorities. When a system is driven by maximizing profit and hoarding resources, human well-being and collective progress are often sidelined. The focus shifts to extracting the maximum value from workers, consumers, and natural resources, while the needs of everyday people are reduced to afterthoughts. In such a system, inequality widens. The rich grow richer, consolidating wealth and power, while the poor struggle to survive. The cost of living rises, driven by the relentless pursuit of profit and basic necessities. Healthcare, housing, education become commodities accessible only to those with enough money. For the average person, life turns into a constant grind, where their labor is exploited to fuel the comfort of the elite. Meanwhile, corporations and politicians, driven by greed, shape policies and practices that preserve their own wealth, ensuring that wealth disparity is not only maintained, but deepened. This creates a cycle of exploitation. Workers, stripped of leverage and bargaining power, are left to toil under unfair conditions, often for wages that barely meet their needs. The constant pressure to produce more for less becomes overwhelming, leading to burnout, stress, and the degradation of their quality of life. As they struggle to stay afloat, the wealthiest individuals and corporations continue to extract resources, moving operations to places where labor is cheap and regulations are lax, further displacing and oppressing vulnerable populations. At the heart of this system is the cold, mechanical nature of capitalism fueled by greed, profit over people, productivity over well-being, and domination over compassion. In a system like this, social services are underfunded, healthcare is treated as a luxury, and education becomes a privilege rather than a right. Those in power continue to consolidate their wealth, leaving the majority to fight over scraps, caught in a cycle of hardship where progress feels distant and life remains a struggle. Beings of lower consciousness gorge themselves on the finite reserves of matter and energy, their hearts and souls dark as the void. They embody the essence of a black hole, pulling in all that surrounds them with insatiable hunger. Picture a social structure built on this lower consciousness, a hierarchy of black holes, with the best and brightest among them becoming the largest and most powerful at the top, devouring everything in their path. Beneath them, countless smaller black holes cascade downward, each desperately grasping for whatever scraps remain. In this relentless struggle for comfort, luxury, power, and status, other living beings are either swept into the vortex, their existence torn apart by the callous indifference or cruelty of these consuming forces.
Crime.
In every society, crime is an unfortunate and natural part of life. In the pursuit of satisfying the konaf, people sometimes resort to maladaptive strategies, leading to crimes and criminal behaviors, essentially violations of another person's konaf. The motivation behind any crime can vary, as different parts of the konaf drive different actions. But the question remains, which aspect of the konaf is the crime trying to fulfill? Take, for instance, a child who is starving and succumbs to the temptation of stealing food. Most people would sympathize with this act of theft, as they can imagine themselves doing the same under similar desperate circumstances. But another person might commit theft not for survival, but out of laziness, seeking a quick way to gain comfort or luxury without effort. Then there are those who steal not for material gain, but for the thrill, the rush of danger, the desire to belong to a new group of friends, or to prove their superiority by outwitting the system and avoiding capture. In the end, the crime of theft can stem from vastly different needs depending on the individual. Few crimes elicit such a visceral response as murder. Many people can rationalize murder in the heat of self-defense, where no other options seem available. Murder also becomes normalized in the context of war, where one side seeks to obliterate the other, with societies not only condoning, but enabling the act by sacrificing the bodies and resources of their citizens. Yet murder can be committed for other reasons entirely. Some may kill to seize possession, as in the case of a deadly armed robbery, or a spouse covertly murdering their partner for life insurance. In its most chilling form, murder can be an act of pure stimulation, with some driven by a morbid curiosity, wondering what it feels like to take a life. Another universal challenge societies face is managing the sex drive. Crimes like sexual harassment and rape permeate all layers of society. No group, religion, or class is immune. Sexual misconduct and infidelity plague families, often leaving destruction in their wake. Opportunities and temptations to misuse their power over others or those in positions of power, whether through wealth, status, physical strength, or sheer numbers. All of us experience needs in varying degrees, but why is it that some would never harm another to fulfill those needs, while others could easily exploit or abuse defenseless children or animals? The simplest and most comprehensive way to explain selfish and selfless behavior is through the ICCON system. Beings of lower consciousness tend to focus only on their own needs, engaging in actions that harm others, while beings of higher consciousness expand their awareness to include the needs of others, leading them to engage in helpful rather than harmful actions.
The sway of anger and hatred.
Murder is more than just a violent act. It can be an expression of intense anger and hatred that has built up to an overwhelming degree. This kind of emotion doesn't arise in isolation, but is often the result of deep-seated grievances, perceived injustices, or unresolved pain. Anger, in its rawest form, can consume a person, narrowing their vision to the point where they see others as obstacles or enemies, rather than as fellow human beings. It distorts the mind, feeding on the belief that the only way to release that rage or to right perceived wrongs is through the ultimate act of violence, taking a life. When anger intensifies, it can turn into hatred, a festering emotion that strips away empathy and compassion, leaving the individual disconnected from the humanity of others. In this state, murder becomes an outlet, a way to channel that intense emotional energy, as if the act of destroying another person could somehow release the murderer from their own internal torment. The act itself, then, is not just physical, but deeply emotional, rooted in psychological wounds that have been left to grow unchecked. Murder, in this sense, is the most extreme manifestation of psychological and emotional deprivation, where an individual has lost touch with the higher aspects of consciousness and is driven entirely by their lowest, most destructive impulses. Understanding the intensity of the anger and hatred that fuel such acts is critical in addressing the emotional and psychological needs that precede violence.
Morality.
The concept of helpful versus harmful behaviors often evokes the concept of morality. The idea of right and wrong or good and evil has always fascinated humanity. We often look for reasons and explanations for morality. We ask why evil exists, and often morality is intimately linked to religious belief. Generally speaking, dominant monotheistic religions believe in one true God who created this universe and embodies all the greatness we can imagine, including being omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. Though God is believed to be beyond our understanding, God represents the source of all that is good and positive, especially qualities of wisdom, kindness, and strength. Because God represents goodness, anything bad in God's creation is outside of His intention. A common conceptualization of the existence of evil is that God gives humanity free will, so any evil that exists is from humanity's folly, whether intrinsic or tempted by the devil. Many religious people believe that goodness can only come from believing in God, so therefore people who do not believe in God tend to lack basic morality. A common statement I've heard is that, without believing in God, what would stop people from acting on their worst impulses? This belief seems to suggest that atheists cannot truly be moral or upright. However, is this truly the case? What is the truth and what is the reality of humanity's morality? From an objective viewpoint that looks at the entire ocean of humanity and sees the shared connectedness among different people from various religious and spiritual beliefs, or lack thereof, anyone from any group can act with virtues or be tempted into vices. The best objective explanation for virtues and vices is the ICCON system. This system easily explains good versus evil in regard to helpful and harmful behaviors. Let's take a closer look at the concept of religion.
Religion.
Common wisdom tells us that there are two things we should avoid discussing at social gatherings: religion and politics. Yet this book aims to understand humanity and objectively analyze reality, which inevitably touches upon these sensitive topics. Religion is woven into the very fabric of human experience. Even when someone does not subscribe to a particular faith, the religious beliefs of others can still have a profound influence on their life, for we are all interconnected in this world. There are a handful of dominant religions and countless smaller ones. Religion can exert an overwhelming influence on its followers, often instilling such deep passion that a person may be willing to kill or die for their beliefs. Every religion offers a way of viewing and understanding reality, which in turn dictates or suggests how people should live their lives. Similarly, this book seeks to understand reality and explore what lessons we can learn to live most effectively. In doing so, there is an inevitable overlap. While these discussions may make some people uncomfortable, the critical point is to observe, analyze, and understand reality. What, after all, is truly real? What is genuinely happening around us? Understanding reality is important because beliefs and philosophies, while fascinating to discuss, have real-world consequences. Philosophy attempts to explain reality and leads us to adopt certain ways of living. Different beliefs lead to different approaches, and often vastly different outcomes. As an extreme example, if someone genuinely does not believe in gravity, no amount of debate will change the reality when they step off a building. The consequences would be catastrophic. Life, therefore, is best managed by first grasping its nuances, religion included. In the same way, understanding the reality of religion is essential. As always, imagine you are an extraterrestrial being observing this peculiar human institution from a distance. What is the reality of religion? What role does it play in shaping human existence?
Regional aspect of religion.
Much like culture, most people are initially born into a religion, or lack thereof, typically shaped by their parents' beliefs and reinforced by the social networks surrounding them. These beliefs are often heavily influenced by geographic location. Generally speaking, the West and Southern Africa are predominantly Christian. India follows Hinduism, Israel Judaism, the Middle East and Northern Africa Islam, and much of the East follows Buddhism. Statistically, a person born in a specific region is more likely than not to belong to the dominant religion of that area. It's just the law of probability. On the positive side, this shared belief can foster unity, camaraderie, and social bonding. Beyond skin color, ethnicity, or nationality, religion provides people with a sense of identity and shared customs. Most religions, in general, aim to inspire their followers toward becoming better people, offering moral guidance as a compass for life. However, for non-believers, religion can be terrifying if its claims about the afterlife are true. The most critical aspect of many religions is not merely about a human lifetime of less than 100 years, but the implications of an afterlife that stretches far beyond, sometimes for eternity. Even within dominant religions, there are a multitude of denominations, each with its own variations. Followers of different denominations within the same religion often see others as holding incorrect or imperfect beliefs. Can followers of different denominations achieve the same heavenly reward, whatever that may be? How exclusive are the criteria for salvation? Does it require certain beliefs, faith, prayers, or rituals? What is the penalty for not being saved, and how long does that punishment last?
Conversations that damn me.
During my visit to Coptic Cairo in Egypt, I had a tour guide, a friendly and educated man who happened to be Muslim. I asked him about the Islamic faith and the fate of non-believers. He explained that, because Islam is the one true religion, anyone who has heard the message but strays away from Allah will face damnation. He said he cared about me, even though we were strangers, and wanted to make sure I knew about this. I responded that since he had just told me about Islam, our conversation had essentially damned me, and I jokingly wished we had never spoken. We both laughed awkwardly. Interestingly, I had the exact same conversation with an extended family member who is Christian. He too told me that since Christianity is the one true religion, anyone who hears the message but strays from Jesus will suffer eternal damnation. He said that he cares about me and wanted to inform me of this as well. This time we didn't laugh awkwardly because, being family, I felt more comfortable sharing my perspective. Now imagine you are studying Earth from an outsider's perspective and realize that if one specific denomination of a religion is true, the implications for the rest of humanity, those not in alignment with that belief, are profound. If being a good person is not enough and salvation requires specific faith, prayers, and rituals, what does that mean for the majority of humanity that lies outside that particular belief system? If the opposite of heaven is hell, and if hell's torment lasts for eternity, can anyone truly comprehend what an eternity of suffering entails? If a devout believer is convinced that their faith is the only path to salvation, it stands to reason that they would feel compelled to save others by any means necessary, even through coercion, for it is, in their view, for the non-believer's own good. Both individuals who shared their faith with me were adamant in their exclusive beliefs. While the Muslim tour guide wasn't family, I still care about him as one human to another. I can't imagine a system where either he or my Christian relative would be damned simply for being born into a different region of the world. What else could be influencing religious belief besides location?
Fulfilling the Konav through religion.
Beyond the benefit of religion in inspiring people to become better versions of themselves, humanity's basic drives intertwine with religion, often using it as a tool to achieve worldly purposes. How does the concept and institution of religion help people satisfy their konav? At the foundation of our needs is a sense of safety and security, which is tied to space and resources, necessities that inevitably lead to competition. Throughout history, many armies have been organized under the banner of religion to fight for land, gold, slaves, and other resources. Opposing armies ready to destroy and kill one another have prayed to their respective god for victory, sometimes praying to the same god. In God's name, countless atrocities have been committed by beings of lower consciousness, who justify their actions as divinely sanctioned. Religion also plays a significant role in fulfilling the need for affirmation and superiority. The belief that one's own faith is the only true path feeds directly into this powerful drive. This mentality, my God is better than your God, affirms the unity of believers, casts out non-believers, and simultaneously asserts the superiority of one group over another. Religion often becomes a fundamental part of a person's identity, and identity craves existence. When someone's religious beliefs are challenged, the confrontation is more than an attack on their ideas. It is perceived as an attempted annihilation of their identity. The deeper a person's identity is rooted in their faith, the more difficult it becomes for them to objectively evaluate their beliefs or shift their worldview. To lose one's faith is to experience a kind of identity death, which can trigger feelings of deep hurt, leading to anger and violence. This dynamic becomes even more complex when religious belief is tied to cultural or national identity. Among those sharing the same faith, the need for competence and superiority emerges once more. Since religion involves specific understandings and rituals, a person's religious competence is often measured by how well they can read, memorize, interpret, or behave according to established norms. Highly competent individuals may rise to the role of religious leaders, asserting their superiority over others. With this position of power, how religious leaders choose to satisfy their konav can lead to abuse and exploitation. Just as corrupted political leaders, some spiritual leaders, while openly claiming higher consciousness, operate from a much lower level of intentionality.
Fervency of faith.
Religion and emotions are intricately entwined. A religious belief that exists solely on an intellectual level is often deemed inferior to one that is both intellectually internalized and emotionally resonant. The perspective seems to suggest that the intensity of one's feelings and the fervor of one's faith are indicators of the truth of that belief. In this view, the truthiness of a religious belief is measured by the passion it evokes in its followers. Given the multitude of religions, interpretations, sects, and denominations across humanity, these variants can challenge individual faith constantly. The more threatened a person feels, the more defensive they become in asserting their beliefs. Rather than expanding consciousness to embrace others and all of humanity, this defensive posture driven by a sense of superiority and insecurity, shrinks consciousness and creates sharp divisions among people, even among those within the same religion but different denominations. The horror of low consciousness is starkly revealed in how religious fanaticism treats non-believers or those deemed blasphemous. History is replete with examples of outsiders facing unspeakable cruelty, torture, and murder perpetrated in the name of religious purity. This grim reality underscores a profound misunderstanding of the essence of truth and God, where the fear and defensiveness of a limited consciousness manifest in acts of violence and oppression. Such actions reflect a deep-seated inability to transcend the narrow confines of one's own beliefs and extend compassion to others. Throughout human history, religious wars and persecution have been rampant and continue even today. Unless humanity can rise above these religious differences, such horrors will persist into the future.
Heaven and Konaf.
While the threat of punishment in hell often relies on fear to coerce adherence, the promise of heaven serves as a more enticing incentive. Heaven is depicted across various beliefs as an idyllic paradise, a vision designed to attract and comfort followers. It's fascinating to observe how the gravity of Konaf affects these portrayals of heaven. Generally, heaven is imagined as a realm of ultimate safety and security, where followers are assured of affirmation by God and a profound reunion with loved ones. Achieving heaven often implies a sense of competence, a testament to one's spiritual journey, and an associated sense of superiority for being closer to the divine. This paradise is also characterized by divine stimulation and the fulfillment of life's ultimate purpose. In different traditions, heaven's descriptions can be richly varied. Some envision a place with a river of honey, symbolizing sweetness and abundance. Others depict a beautiful garden, reflecting peace and beauty. There are even interpretations that include the presence of virgins, catering to specific desires and ideals. These vivid images of heaven highlight not only the diverse ways in which human cultures envision ultimate fulfillment, but also the deep connection between religious ideals and human desires.
Ideals versus reality.
Religious ideals and the beliefs people profess often stand in stark contrast to their actual behaviors, leading to disheartening discrepancies. The primal strings that manipulate humanity, craving pleasure, aversion to pain, clinging to life, fear of death, hunger, thirst, libido, safety and survival, affirmation of existence, competition for resources, and the desire to feel special and superior, can taint even the most noble religious beliefs. If we were to objectively compare individuals' professed religious beliefs with their actual way of living, how much alignment or hypocrisy might we uncover? Consider, for example, the predominantly Buddhist nations of Asia, where compassion for all sentient beings is a core tenet. This stands in contrast to certain interpretations within Christianity, which view animals as soulless and merely existing to serve humans. Are these Buddhism-influenced Asian countries truly exemplifying the highest levels of compassion and animal rights, serving as models for the international community? How many people have taken a step back to critically evaluate their religious status and question the reasons behind their beliefs? If an extraterrestrial being free from human biases were to choose a religion, which one might it select? Despite the myriad differences in religious beliefs, is there a way to fairly assess everyone and all of humanity on an equal footing? If we cling to the notion that only one true religion exists and that non-believers face eternal damnation, what would it take to convert entire regions, such as all of Europe and the United States, to Islam, or all of the Middle East to Christianity? Isn't forced conversion, regardless of the methods used, a paradoxical act of mercy intended to save someone from eternal suffering?
Assessment of the Inverted Cone of Consciousness, or ICCON.
From a biological and psychological perspective, I believe we can gauge an individual's position within the ICCON system by observing their behavior and actions. At what level is their consciousness predominantly functioning? Are they operating at the most basic level, driven by the pleasure-pain principle, where their focus is solely on self-preservation and simple self-stimulation, such as the pursuit of food and sex? How does this self-focused intentionality impact those around them, and do they show any concern for these effects? Alternatively, are they functioning at a slightly higher level, where they exhibit greater care for others, yet remain influenced by self-needs and a sense of superiority? How do they navigate the gravitational pull of their conaf, safety, security, affirmation, competence, stimulation, superiority, meaning, purpose, and sex drive? Regardless of an individual's religious beliefs, how expansive is their consciousness when it comes to assessing reality and embracing others? How does their belief system address and accommodate diverse humanity across different regions and customs? Despite professed divine inspirations for love and compassion, the true measure of one's beliefs is reflected in their treatment of those who are different from themselves. How do they act toward others who do not share their beliefs or customs? This is where the genuine depth of their consciousness and the authenticity of their compassion are revealed.